The 2025 Six Kings Slam Final wasn't just another match, it was a moment that froze time in the history of tennis. Under the blazing lights of Riyadh, Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz faced each other like two young emperors fighting for the future of the sport. The crowd was electric, every rally felt like a spark in a storm, and the atmosphere pure tension and beauty. Everything seemed flawless, almost too flawless. But hidden beneath that perfection was something no one saw coming. Stay until the end, because what Roger Federer said after the match left the entire tennis world stunned, and trust me, no one expected it. From the very first serve, it was clear this wasn't going to be an ordinary night of tennis. Sinner moved across the court like a conductor leading an orchestra, every shot precise, every rally controlled, every glance calm and calculated. On the other side, Alcaraz looked restless, almost human in his frustration, as if he could feel that this stage wasn't built for him tonight. The opening games were a perfect snapshot of a new generation rising, fearless, powerful, mechanical in accuracy, yet overflowing with intensity. But as the minutes passed, the rhythm shifted. Sinner began to dictate every exchange, breaking through Alcaraz's defense with cold precision and punishing returns that drew gasps from the crowd. Every time Alcaraz lifted his fist, trying to fire himself up, Sinner silenced him with another flawless point. The fans felt it too. The arena wasn't just watching a match, it was witnessing the calm domination of a player who had entered a different level. When Sinner closed out the first set with that stunning backhand down the line, the entire arena erupted like a volcano. Fans rose to their feet, cheering, screaming, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Even those who had come to support Alcaraz couldn't help but applaud. It felt like a changing of the guard, one generation quietly handing over the crown to the next. Sinner didn't celebrate wildly, he simply clenched his fist and gave that faint, disciplined smile that said everything. Across the net, Alcaraz looked shaken. He tried to reset, to force himself into a rhythm, but Sinner's precision was suffocating. Every rally turned into a masterclass in control and patience. The Italian wasn't just winning points, he was dismantling Alcaraz's confidence piece by piece. Cameras zoomed in on both faces, one calm as ice, the other burning with frustration. It was beauty and brutality all at once. The first set ended not just as a scoreline, but as a statement. The new era of tennis had officially arrived. As the second set began, you could see Alcaraz trying to summon something, anything, to break the spell Sinner had cast over him. He mixed up his shots, charged the net, and even let out a few defiant roars after big points, but nothing seemed to shake Sinner's rhythm. Every time Carlos landed a clean winner, Sinner answered with something colder, sharper, more calculated. It was as if he could read the future, anticipating each move before it even happened. The frustration started to show. Alcaraz's footwork became rushed, his timing slightly off. Between points, he looked up at his box with eyes that almost pleaded for answers. The crowd, still buzzing from the first set, sensed the tension shift. They wanted a fight, a comeback, a moment of chaos, but Sinner gave them none. He was unshakable, playing like a man who had already seen the finish line. The camera caught him between games, calm and expressionless, while Alcaraz paced like a lion trapped in a cage. What was supposed to be a duel had turned into a lesson in control. And yet, behind that perfection, something felt missing, a spark, a heartbeat, the raw unpredictability that once made tennis magic. That feeling of unease would soon echo in Roger Federer's words. When the match finally ended and Sinner raised his hand in quiet triumph, it felt almost scripted. No chaos, no tears, no disbelief, just calm perfection. But the real shock came minutes later when Roger Federer appeared on a global broadcast, seated in a sleek studio under soft lights, looking both relaxed and reflective. The interviewer asked him for his thoughts on the final, expecting the usual compliments about the new generation. Instead, Roger smiled faintly, paused for a moment, and said something that instantly changed the tone of the entire night. "It was a beautiful match," he began, "but maybe too beautiful." The studio went silent. That short sentence hit like a backhand winner down the line, subtle, elegant, and devastatingly precise. Federer leaned forward slightly, his eyes steady. "Sometimes when everything runs too perfectly, you lose a bit of truth," he continued. I love tennis when it breathes, when it trembles, when you don't know what's coming next. The host smiled awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh or agree, but Federer wasn't joking. His words carried the weight of a man who had lived through every emotion this sport could offer. In that moment, it wasn't about Sinner or Alcaraz anymore, it was about the soul of tennis itself. Federer's tone grew softer, but his message hit even harder. "You know," he said, "there's a kind of danger in perfection. It's clean, it's flawless, but it can also be lifeless." He glanced toward the replay screen where Sinner's precise forehands looped in slow motion, every shot picture perfect. "What made tennis special," Federer continued, "was never just the technique, it was the feeling. The sweat, the nerves, the chaos that made you forget it was a game." He smiled almost nostalgically. "Sinner is extraordinary, don't get me wrong. His control is gold, his discipline unmatched. But part of me wishes he'd lose that control once in a while, just to remind us he's human." You could sense the interviewer didn't expect that honesty. Federer wasn't criticizing Sinner. He was describing the delicate line between greatness and emotion. "The true legends," he added, "they had fire. We made mistakes, we smashed rackets, we screamed. And in those imperfect moments, that's where the magic lived." The studio lights flickered slightly as Federer paused, letting the words hang. You could almost hear the world of tennis holding its breath, realizing that the king wasn't just talking about Sinner, he was reminding everyone what the sport used to feel like. Federer leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful, his voice calm but unflinching. "What worries me most," he said, "is that the system around these players no longer lets them breathe. Everything is calculated, the camera angles, the interviews, even how they're supposed to smile after a loss." He shook his head slightly. "Back in my time, when you lost a big point, you could scream, throw your racket, feel something real. Now, every move is analyzed for social media, every emotion turned into content." The host nodded quietly, and Federer continued, his words growing heavier. "These kids live under constant pressure to be perfect machines, they train like robots, play like robots, and still have to smile for the sponsors afterward." For a moment, he looked directly into the camera, and his tone turned personal. "Perfection can be a trap. When you win, people call you robotic. When you lose, they say you weren't focused enough. Either way, you're never human enough." The silence in the studio was absolute. Federer wasn't just talking about Sinner or Alcaraz anymore. He was addressing an entire generation built to impress but afraid to feel. "Tennis," he said softly, "was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be a battle." Then, Federer's tone shifted softer, almost fatherly. "Jannik," he said, addressing Sinner directly through the camera, "you're young, but you already understand more than most. You're focused, respectful, professional, maybe even too much so. But if I could give you one piece of advice, it would be this. Don't be afraid to let the world see you fall apart once in a while." He smiled, the kind of smile that carried years of experience and quiet pain. The crowd doesn't just fall in love with champions. They fall in love with fighters, with those who stumble, get angry, cry, and then stand up again. His voice grew more personal, as if he were reliving his own past. "When I watch you, I see a little of myself, that same obsession with getting everything right, every move, every word. But I learned something the hard way. Greatness doesn't come from control, it comes from freedom." Federer paused, eyes glistening under the lights. "The day I accepted that not everything had to be perfect was the day I started to enjoy the game again. Maybe that's when you'll find your true greatness too." The room fell silent, not because of what he said, but because of how real it felt. Before the interviewer could even change the subject, Federer continued, shifting the focus to the other side of the net, and "Carlos," he said with a knowing smile, "he's the opposite of Sinner instinct, emotion, fire. Sometimes that energy burns too fast, but that's also what makes him electric to watch." Federer gestured with his hands, as if tracing their contrasting styles in the air. "Sinner is calculation, Alcaraz is chaos. If you could take the mind of one and the heart of the other, you'd create the perfect player." The host laughed softly, but Federer wasn't joking. His eyes said he meant every word. "Carlos plays like the game still surprises him," he added. "He doesn't fear mistakes, he lives in them. And that's something this new generation can't afford to lose." For a moment, Federer looked almost proud, not of himself, but of what tennis had become, even with its flaws. Both of them are brilliant, he said. Different sides of the same future. And maybe that's exactly what the sport needs, balance between control and chaos. The studio fell silent again, the air heavy with admiration. Federer had just summed up in a single breath what the entire tennis world had been feeling but couldn't quite say. Within minutes of that interview, Federer's words were everywhere. Social media exploded clips, quotes, heated debates. Some fans called him nostalgic, clinging to an era that no longer exists. Others hailed him as the only man brave enough to say what everyone was thinking. The phrase, "too perfect," began trending across platforms, and the tennis world found itself divided. Was Federer right? Had the sport traded emotion for aesthetics, truth for showmanship? Meanwhile, Sinner and Alcaraz stayed silent, perhaps still processing the meaning behind every sentence. Yet, as the online storm raged, one thing became clear. Federer had once again shifted the conversation, not with a forehand, but with his honesty. Cameras captured him quietly, removing his earpiece, smiling that familiar smile as he stood to leave the studio. And just before the feed cut off, his microphone caught one last whisper. "Beautiful match, but tennis is something else." Those few words sent chills through every corner of the sport. Because once again, Roger Federer reminded the world that greatness isn't only measured in trophies or precision, it's found in imperfection, in feeling, in the moments that make you forget everything else. The king may have left the court, but even in silence, his voice still echoes through the heart of tennis.